Well, you know how I'm continually going on about you not being tourists when you look at these maps. I want to now talk to you a little bit about air photo interpretation. Okay, there's a lot you can tell just by looking at an air photograph if you look closely. All right, so we're going to zoom in. See how we're starting to, once again, pull all these tools together and start to use them. Okay, you can see that I've prepared this pink cadastral layer earlier so that so it's transparent. We can see that there's these big blocks here. This is that big block that we saw, or that big piece of land that we saw in when it was opaque or you couldn't see through it. And I'm just going to get rid of this now because we're only going to look at the photo. Okay, so I've clicked that off there. All right, so the first things, the things I have to offer are both social and environmental. First thing I see, of course, is this inlet here. It's obviously supported by some sort of wall. You can see that the sand is backed up against it. Okay, and over here, so there's a big difference between the amount of sand at the entrance to this inlet. We can see also that if we zoom in, and I'll zoom in a bit closer. This is obviously deep water all the way up here, because otherwise there'd be no moorings up here. The boats wouldn't be able to get up there. It's more than likely dredged in here. You can see the water is deeper in there. You can also see that it's predominantly sandy. It's a lovely beach by the looks of things, and there's groins all the way along here. That's something I hadn't noticed before. So they've got some sort of a problem with the beaches disappearing. So they've put groins in there. And we'll go to the previous view. This really interested me here because although it's obviously subject to inundation, it is because it's part of this inlet, but they like to drain it. These people have put in drains here, and you can tell they're drains so that this area is really flat. You can tell because these are so straight. And there's been big problems draining this because there's so many of these drains. Okay, that's something else we can tell. This will more than likely, if I'm to think of this in an environmental way, these will more than likely be very heavy clay soils, because otherwise you wouldn't have this drainage problem. So the water's sitting around. In contrast, I have a deep suspicion that some of these areas are sandy soils, because otherwise they wouldn't be so burnt off. And you can see that there's some green lawns, so people are obviously watering their lawns. This photo is taken in summer. I can tell that because the shadows are so slight. Okay. Mostly, I would suggest these are single-story homes. And if we wanted to look at how big they were, what we would do is we could easily run a line around one of them, just to get some sort of inkling. So 128 square meters, so that's 12 or 13 square home. If that's a single-story home, it's suggesting to me that it's probably not the sort of wealthy area that would have larger homes in it. And I say this without looking at any demographic information. This is just my look at the interpretation of the air photo. The other thing that makes me think that that we have areas socioeconomically, we have wealthy areas and not so wealthy areas here. If I just grab this, is that you've got all these moorings and so forth in here, which would suggest to me that would be a little bit more of a wealthy area. But the lack of swimming pools. I through experience, I find that areas that have a lot of swimming pools tend to be a bit wealthier. But having said that, there may be cultural reasons why there's no swimming pools in this area. We're actually looking at Yarmouth in Massachusetts, and if whoever can spell Massachusetts and get it right the first time, well, good luck to you. It's a very tricky place name to spell. Okay, the other thing that tells me this, something else that about this is that the area is probably an older area. And I say this because the roads, where was I looking at? Yeah, this road here seems to have lots of cracks in it. They're not shadows cast by trees, because we can see, there is a shadow cast by a tree, and tree shadows look quite different than that. We can see down here is that there's a new estate down here, pardon me, down here with new tennis courts, green lawns everywhere. The only lawns that are suffering are the ones completely on the beachfront. Otherwise, the place is well watered. And if I zoom in, we'll see that the shadows cast are a bit longer. And there's a swimming pool by the looks of it. Okay, so longer shadows equals taller homes. The other thing that interested me was that I just got the impression that there seemed to be die-off in a lot of the vegetation around here. Now, there are many reasons for this, so let's zoom into here a bit. There are many reasons why this could happen. So look at these trees in here. They seem to be dying off. Now, this may be because this is a certain sort of vegetation. This may be because the trees were planted out all at the same time and they're all dying off at the same time. But it may also be due to drought conditions. So that's something that you would probably investigate. See, I'm seeing all this in here. These look to be dead trees in here. Now, I want to show you a trick. And the trick is that if you're unsure of things, always check to see if Google's been there. This is a tool that I've been using recently in some of my projects, is that Google, of course, have taken photos of so many places. Now, you see I dragged this little man from over here. Those lines that show up blue, I'm sorry, I was looking for a particular address. Roads that Google has been on and taken photos. So it's a bit of a pity. I would have loved them to have gone up some of the side streets here and taken photos of the housing and the real estate and the roads and the vegetation and so forth. But if you run the little man on it and you let the little man go, look at this. And because I wanted to show you this car that I found before, I thought that was pretty fantastic. You can see that dominantly the houses seem to be single story. They seem to be weatherboard or made of wood. They seem to be fairly small, okay? Which is what I was seeing in the air photo. And to be honest, I wrote those notes on that air photo prior to having a look at Street View, at this Street View. But I use Street View for a lot of my projects just to check up on stuff like this, but to also, if I've forgotten something after I've done field work, it just can help remind you of some of the local environment. So we'll go back to qGIS. Okay, that's just giving you some sort of insight into air photo interpretation. Okay. Don't just be a tourist. Think about the sorts of things that you can see in photographs. And what I've seen here is probably only just touching the surface. particularly if you can use this the Google Street View. Okay, that's it for air photo interpretation.